Hello, and welcome back to another Eduonics tutorial. In this video, we're finishing off the Effects and Techniques section in Photoshop. To finish off this section, we'll be going over how to create an alien skin effect. Whether you believe in the existence of alien life or not, you have to admit it's a pretty interesting idea. And it makes for some great television, movies, and photos. I'm not sure if aliens do exist, but I'm going to try making my own version of what they might look like. It's been said that aliens might have some human-like features, so I'm going to be working with this photo of a woman. I'll do my best to make her look like a creature from outer space. I'm going to start by duplicating my background layer. I'll just go to my Layers panel and click and drag my background layer to the new layer icon. This has duplicated my background layer as an unlocked layer. Now that I have an unlocked duplicate, I don't intend to use my original background layer anymore. So I'll click the eye icon next to it to hide it. There are a lot of ideas as to what aliens might look like, but the general opinion is that they have bigger eyes than us. So I'm going to increase the size of her eyes. I'll go up to Filter, Liquify. Now that I'm in the Liquify window, I'll go over to the left and select the Bloat tool. Then I'll use the right bracket key on my keyboard to increase the size of my Bloat tool. I'm going to pay attention to the tool options over here on the right and increase the size of my bloat till the brush size gets around 500. Okay, that's good. Now I'll just use my bloat tool to increase the size of one of these eyes. I may have to click a few times, but I'll continue to get a good size that's just a bit bigger than my original eye size. That looks all right. Now I'll move on to the other eye, and I'll use the bloat tool to increase the size of that as well. My goal is to make it perfectly match the eye on the left so they will be completely symmetrical. That's pretty good. These eyes look pretty good. They're definitely more alien-like. Now I'll take it a step further and increase the size of the pupils within the eyes. I'll just decrease the size of my bloat tool a bit. Then I'll go into the left eye and increase the size of the pupil. Nice. That's pretty good. Now I'll just do the exact same thing with the other pupil. Now remember, I'm just trying to make it match with the other pupil, so I'll try not to get too carried away. That looks pretty good. These eyes are definitely more alien-like, but this nose is still very human. Most alien noses lack any sort of protrusion, or are much smaller than regular human noses. I'll just go over to the Liquify tools, get my Pucker tool, and I'll use it to make the nose smaller. I'll just be careful to avoid the lips below, and make the nose smaller and more alien-like. There we go. Now we're getting into alien territory. I'll go up and click OK to apply this Liquify filter. Since I made the eyes bigger on this layer, I'll double-click the layer name and rename it to Big Eyes. And I'm going to be applying some filters to this layer. So I'll convert it to a smart object by right-clicking it and selecting Convert to Smart Object. Now that I have some more physical alien features, I'll do what I can to make the skin look more alien. I'll add a new blank layer. Then I'll go up to Filter, Render, Clouds. Now to blend this with my layer, I'll go over to the blend mode and switch it from normal to vivid light. Now it's not only blending in with her skin, it's also not showing up in the white background, which makes it that much easier to control. I'll just reduce the visibility of this clouds layer by going up to opacity and reducing it to about 25%. Now the clouds are acting as sort of skin blotches or bruises. So I'll double-click the layer name and rename this layer to Bruises. Alien skin is usually portrayed as green too. So I'll sample the skin color of this woman and do my best to give it an alien green. I'll go down to the bottom of the Layers panel, click the Adjustment Layer button, and select Hue Saturation. Now I want to target her skin only. So up here in the Adjustment Layer Properties, I'll change the sample from Master down to Yellows. Then I'm going to try to target the tone of her skin without affecting anything else. To make it easier to see my color range, I'll go ahead and change the hue. I'm going to bring this up to around positive 85. This will give me the green color that I want. Then I'll go down to these sliders on the bottom. First, I'll drag the tiny dot on the far left, and I'll pay attention to the numbers above the color range on the far left again. And I'm just going to drag this tiny dot to the left till the numbers above get to about 300 degrees. Then I'll select the next line in the color range and drag that to the left till the corresponding number gets to about 15 degrees. Then I'll click the dot on the far right, and I'm going to drag this further to the right. And I'll drag this till the number above on the far right reads about 165 degrees. Finally, I'll click the line near the far right and I'll drag that to the right till the corresponding number gets to about 135 degrees. Okay, perfect. Now I'm going to go back up to the lightness slider, and I'm going to drag that to the left to reduce it to around -65. Now this is looking a little desaturated, so I'll go up to Saturation, and I'll click and drag this slider to the right till I get to around +60. That looks much better. The only problem is that some of the green is showing up here in her lips and in her teeth. Not exactly the look I'm going for. So I'll make sure that I have the Hue Saturation Layer Mask selected. Then I'll go and get my brush tool. I'm going to use a black brush to brush out her teeth and her lips. There we go. Now the green is only affecting the areas that I want. So I'll go ahead and rename this hue saturation layer to green. Now I'm going to duplicate my big eyes layer. To do that, I'll just press and hold my Alt key on my keyboard, and I'll click and drag my big eyes layer up above my bruises layer. Then I'll go up to Filter, Filter Gallery. Then I'll activate the Artistic tab, and I'm going to select the Plastic Warp filter. Then I'll make sure that the highlight strength is around 13. I'll set the detail to around 13 as well, and I'll set the smoothness to around 8. Then I'll go up and click OK to apply my plastic wrap. Now I'll go in the Layers panel and switch the blend mode from normal to multiply. This should offset the highlights that were brought on when I applied the plastic wrap. Now I'll rename this layer to Plastic. The only thing is that with this filter came some outlines on my white background. I'm going to have to mask these outlines out. I'm going to select my original big eyes layer. Then I'll go over to the Tools panel, right-click my Quick Selection tool, and get my Magic Wand tool. Then I'll just hold my Shift key and click in the white spaces outside of my subject to select the background. Perfect. Now I'll just invert my selection by hitting Ctrl, Shift, I on my keyboard. Then I'll select my plastic layer and click the Layer Mask button to add a new layer mask. There we go. The change may not be that noticeable, but the outlines from my plastic wrap are gone. The only other thing about the plastic wrap layer is that it really darkened her eyes quite a bit. So I'm going to go back to the Tools panel, get my brush tool. Then I'll use a black brush to hide the areas of her eyes that I don't want to be darkened by the plastic wrap. Okay, perfect. So far, the clouds render has added some shadow diversity into her face. And beyond that, the plastic wrap has made her skin look more translucent and alien-like. Now I'd like this skin to have a bit more of a gritty texture to it. To make another copy of my big eyes layer, I'll just press and hold Alt on my keyboard and click and drag the big eyes layer up above the plastic layer. Then I'll make sure that my foreground color is set to black, and I'll go up to Filter, Filter Gallery. Then I'll enable the Sketch tab, and I'll select Bas Relief. Now I'll just make sure that the detail is at 13. and that the smoothness is at 1. And I'll switch the light so that in the image, the light is coming up from the bottom of her face. Then I'll go up and click OK. So this has added a lot of texture to my image. I'm going to go ahead and rename this layer to Texture. Then I'll go up and set the blend mode to Overlay. Then I'll reduce the opacity to around 70%. This is looking pretty good, but I think it added just a little too much texture into her lips. So I'll copy the layer mask from the green saturation layer into this texture layer. To do that, I'll just press and hold the Alt key, then I'll click the layer mask in my green layer and drag it down to my texture layer. There we go. That's better. All right, we're almost done. I've noticed that sometimes images of aliens show that the aliens have some scales on their skin. So I'm going to add some scales onto my image here. I'll Alt-click and drag my Big Eyes layer again and drag it above my texture layer. Now I'll make sure that my foreground color is set to white and my background color is set to black. Then I'll go up to Filter, Filter Gallery. Then I'll go down and enable Texture. And then I'll select the Stained Glass filter. Then I'll make sure that the cell size is at 13. And I'll make sure that the border thickness is at 2. And I'll make sure that the light intensity is at 0. Then I'll click OK to apply the stained glass. Well, this looks neat, but it doesn't look much like scales at all. Well, I'm not quite done yet. I'm going to go ahead and rename this layer to Face Scales. Then I'll set its blend mode to Multiply. Now I'll apply the plastic layer mask to this layer. To do that, I'll just press and hold Alt and click and drag the plastic layer mask to my new Face Scales layer. Okay, that's looking a little bit better. But I'm still getting some unwanted scales in her lips and her fingers. I'll Control-click the layer mask from my green hue layer to select the lips. Then I'll invert the selection by hitting Control-Shift-I on my keyboard. Then I'll fill in the lips by going up to Edit, Fill, then I'll choose Black and click OK. Then I'll deselect by hitting Control-D on my keyboard. Okay, I'm a little bit closer, but I still have scales in her nostrils and her fingers. I'll go ahead and use my black brush to paint in the nostrils and hide the scales. That looks better. Then I'll go up in the tool options and increase the hardness to around 80%. Then I'll paint in the fingers to hide the scales in them. There we go. Much, much better. I'll also use my brush to do a little touch-up here and there wherever it's needed. Okay, we're getting very close. I'm going to duplicate my face scales layer by holding Alt and clicking and dragging it below itself. Then I'm going to rename this from face scales to neck scales. Then I'm going to select the neck scales layer mask and use my brush to mask out her face. I only want to show the neck, so I'll brush out everything from her chin to her forehead. I'll start with just a general outline. Then, when I'm done, I'll Alt-click the layer mask to enter into it. Then I can more easily fill this outline with black to hide her face. Great! I'll click one of my layers to go back into my layers again. Now I want to subtract this neck portion of the selection from my face scales layer. So I'll just Control-click the layer mask from my neck scales layer. Then I'll go up and click the face scale layer mask. Then, to cut this from my face scale selection, I'll go up to Edit, Fill, I'll make sure that it's using black, and click OK. Then, I'll hit Ctrl-D on my keyboard to deselect. Now I'd like to decrease the size of the neck scales. So I'll go back down and double-click the filter gallery to enter my stained glass filter. I want the neck scales to be roughly around half the size of the face scales. So I'll bring the cell size down to around 7. Then I'll keep the border thickness at 2 and the light intensity at 0. And I'll click OK. And finally, I want the neck scales to be a bit less visible. So I'll go up to opacity and reduce it to around 30%. Perfect. Okay, that looks pretty darn good. Let's take a look at the before and the after. I'll just press and hold my Alt key, then click the eye icon next to my original background layer to isolate it. So there's before, and here's after. Wow, this is definitely much more alien. The facial features are very different, and the skin looks like it's from another world entirely. And one of the best things about this is that I can go back to any one of the effects and tweak them to my liking, including the skin color. I can just go up and double-click my green hue layer. Then, to select the skin, I'll switch from Master to Yellows. Then I can just drag this hue slider to change the skin color to anything I want. Very cool. In this tutorial, I went over how to use Liquify to alter the facial features of your subject. I went over how to add some shadow diversity to skin with render clouds. I went over how to change skin color with a hue saturation layer, how to make sort of a translucent alien look with plastic warp, how to add some rough skin texture with bas relief, and finally, how to add scaly skin with stained glass. That will do it for creating an alien skin effect. I'm going to wrap up my effects and techniques in a course overview in the next video.